So thank you very much for your introduction and greetings to you all. So this work is a work that I work with Assistant Professor Kane Jishima and Professor Ken Sato, and we are from NII and Sokendai in Tokyo, Japan. So this presentation is divided into 4 sections and shown here. So let's go, let me give some background of this work. So in this work, we consider the problem that the literal interpretation of statutes may lead to counterintuitive consequences. Which are the counterintuitive consequences are the consequences that do not meet the social expectation and the consequence occurs since the social expectation is evolved or exceptional cases happen unexpectedly in real life. So this kind of consequence cause absurdity, strange behaviors, or leads to public interest if the consequence were not properly handled. So judges, especially in high courts, may handle this kind of consequence by considering the exceptional situation of the case and make the legal judgment known as the case law that divides the interpretation of the statute to handle the exceptional situation. So in this work, we consider minimal revision, which is one common criterion from the standard revision theory. We reset it to adjust theories as little as possible. So minimal revision can be divided into 2 main types. The first type, as we call syntax-based minimal revision, is to keep the set of rules as close as possible to the original one. So this type of minimal revision is independent from the facts of the case. And the second type is a semantics-based minimal revision, which is to minimize the change of the set of conclusions obtained from the theory. So this type of minimal revision depends on the facts of the case, since different facts give different sets of conclusions. So although the syntax-based minimal revision is benefit from the independence of the facts of the case, we argue that the semantics-based is more preferable in legal reasoning. Since legal reasoning is a hybrid reasoning between rule-based reasoning and case-based reasonings. So therefore, we propose here one kind of semantic-based minimal revision called a dominant-based minimal revision. So this solves some problems in attempting to develop a semantic-based minimal revision. So let me give some settings of this work. So in this work, we consider a normal logic program also known as a log program for representing the statute as its many previous works. So a normal logic program hereafter a program in short is a set of rules in the form of head, if, the bodies, where the body is divided into 2 parts. The first part is the positive body, and the second part is the negative body containing the negations, where the negations here, it shall be interpreted as negation as failure. So in civil litigation, a judge would make correspondence between factual situation in the case and factual concept in statutes. Then the judge would conclude a legal decision based on the statutes. So to reflect this civil litigation, we determine propositions into 2 types. The first type is rule proposition, and the second type is fact proposition. So the fact domain is a set of all fact propositions in the language, and the case is a subset of the fact domain. So we define the fact-based and the rule-based as shown, and we get that the answer set is the set of conclusion from the union of the fact-based FB with a rule-based RB. So this represents the literal interpretation of the statute, which is represented as RB when applying in a particular case that's represented by FB. So we denote a proposition P is in the answer set of FB union RB by FB union RB derives P. So exceptional case is the case that the judge disagrees with the literal interpretation in the case, and the judge introduced a new factual concept to distinguish the case as exceptional. So we formalize the agree and disagree as follows, saying that FB union FB1, the fact that FB1 union with the rule-based RB1 agrees with the fact that FB2 union with the rule-based RB2 on some proposition P if it's derived in the same they derive in the same manner, or they do not derive P in the same manner. So otherwise we say that if B1 union B1 disagrees with B2 union B2 on P. So now we can formalize counterintuitive consequence resolution task, or CCR task in short, which is the tuple of RB, FBE, and P, where RB is a rule-based representing statutes, and FBE is a fact-based representing exceptional case, which contain at least one new fact proposition not occurring in RB. So P is a rule proposition representing the considered counterintuitive consequence. And we call some rule-based RB prime is as a resolution to the CCR task if FBE union RB prime disagrees with FBE union RB on P. So this implies the counterintuitive consequence is resolved, the P1. So let's state with the example. Let the fact domain be the set of ABC, and this is the simple rule base of P if A, Q if P if Q, Q if A, Q and Q if B. So suppose P here is a counterintuitive consequence, and we apply this exceptional form applying this rule base in an exceptional case represented by the set of AC. Then we get that there are many resolutions to this CCR task. One is to add the exception not R in the first rule like this, and then we add the rule R if C. And then the second way is to add not R in the second rule, and we add the rule R if C. Both are the resolution to this CCR task. So we use the concept of a coupled indicator debugging to specify which rule should be an exception, which is not to be put in. So for example, we say that RB2 aims to resolve the coupled P because it adds in not R in the supporting rule of P, while RB3 it aims to resolve coupled Q since it's added in the supporting rule of Q. So we consist this kind of semantics of a rule base and the semantics minoration. So we consider semantics of a rule base RB as a set of all pairs between the possible fact base FB and the answer set of FB union RB. So for example, this is RB1 and RB2 from previous slides. So we get this kind of possible fact base that interpolate from the fact domain of ABC. And then we have the answer set of corresponding to the rule base RB1 and the rule base RB2 as shown here. So we get that the symmetric difference of this answer set would contain R if the fact base contains C, because the new rule is R if C. Therefore, we have R in all such fact base, and the set of C, the set of AC, the set of BC, and the fact base of ABC. So to eliminate this kind of effect, we consider partial symmetric difference with respect to some set. So as per the set of P here. So we create the intersection between the given set and the symmetric difference then we get that there are three rows. In this example, there are three rows such that it contains the set of P as this partial symmetric difference. So for another example, as we have the RB3 that add not R in the second rule instead of the first rule, we get that in the same manner, we get the partial symmetric difference only in the row that's correspond to the fact base FB as AC. So we can see that RB3, this kind of RB3 has a smaller change than RB2 from the original rule-based RB1 with respect to the set of P. And it seems that RB3 is a semantic-based minimal revision with respect to P, the set of P, among all the solutions to the CCR task. So if we would like to have the smaller change than this RB3, we need to make this law to be empty set. But to make such thing, it make that it's not a resolution to the exceptional case of AC anymore. So we can consider RB3 as a semantic-based, it seems. However, there are two problems in such definitions of minimal revision. First, it is exhaustive to interpolate the answer set for each fact base. And the minimal revision is broken when the fact domain is extended. So let's make it illustrate with the example that suppose we extend the fact domain in the previous example to the set of A, B, C, D. Then we get with following tables. And we get that the row that have non-empty set within the set of P in this case contains in the row corresponding to the fact base AC and also ACD. So it guides that there exists a resolution, some resolution RB prime that have smaller change than RB3 by instead that such RB prime would have no change. So this row will be empty set as it then. However, we consider such resolution RB prime to be too specific because we need to change two times. The first one is to change corresponding to AC, and we need to reverse back in the fact base ACD. So to solve this problem, we consider that each fact base has a corresponding specific rule base and dominant rule base with respect to the considered constraints. So we say some subset SR of ARB is of whole rule base RB is specific to the fact base FB with respect to the whole rule base RB and on position P. If SR is a minimal subset in the sense of set inclusion, such that if we union with such SR with the given FB, it agrees on the union the whole rule base RB with such FB on P, and no intermediate rule base SR prime such that is in between SR and RB, and FB union SR prime disagree with FB union SR on P. So specific rule base might not be unique, and if we have some specific rule base set of specific rule base, we say that a dominant rule base is such set of specific rule base but removing the negative body of the rule. So let me illustrate with the example that we have the rule base RB1 and RB2 as previously illustrated, and we say that the dominant difference of the dominant base semantics is considered by the pair of dominant rule base changes, regardless how many fact base would dominant rule base are changed in that way. So for the example of RB1 and RB2, we get that there are three patterns that have been changed. So as shown here, the first these three rows. So for another example that we have RB3, where the second not R is added in the second rule. we get that they have only two patterns that have changed. One is the pattern of the corresponding to the fact-based AC, and another is correspond to the fact-based ABC. So this pattern also although it was we same when we extend the fact domain. So if we extend it to ABCD, we will have the same pattern here, but we does not count how the fact base is, but only count the patterns. So that this kind of difference is independent from the extension of the fact domain. So to obtain this kind of dominant rule base, one way is to extend the body of the new rule so that it influences the dominant rule base as least as possible. For example, if we suppose we would like P is as a culprit and we add not R in the first rule, then the way to make minimal revision is to extend AC the new rule as R if AC instead of R if C. Then we get only two revision that only two changes that in the rows.
Mr. Wachara, 5 more minutes, please. Right.
So given a CCR task, let's say with the working example that given a CCR task of JRB1, JRB1, which is the rule-based representation Japanese Civil Code Article 612, and this talk about the cancellation of the lease contract due to the subleasing without permission, and this to prove that the cancellation due to sublease, we need to prove 4 requisites. The first one is the lease contract must be effective. The second one is the sublease contract must be effective, and the third one is the listing use, and finally the cancellation is manifested. And this one exception, that is sublease has been approved before cancellation, then cancellation due to sublease shall not be valid. So this effective contract has one rule R2, but the effective sublease contract suppose that there are two rules R3 and R4. Yeah, so there are two types of effective sublease contract. And this one exception rule also about the approval of sublease here in R5. And we have the exceptional case that have this kind of 6 facts, which literally make cancellation due to sublease to be valid. But the judge indicates the facts about non-destruction of confidence as an extra fact, and would like that and did not intend that cancellation due to sublease to be valid in this case. So the cancellation due to sublease is our counterintuitive consequence here. So one way to revise to have the solution of this is to add new exception, while the new exception is derived from non-destruction of confidence, the extra facts. However, we get that this JRB2 will make a necessary change to the dominant rule base of the relevant case that with the both case of sublease, a second kind of sublease, since it will execute the exception as shown in this table. So another solution is as shown that instead we have the new rule of exception that derive from these 3 conditions. So when compile this kind of rule base and fact base and execute this dominant rule base, we get that the dominant rule base of this kind of this JRBT does not make unnecessary change occurring in JRB2. JRBT is actually a dominant base minimal revision. Usually this new rule for the new exception box of the type of sublease and allows only the type of sublease that relevant to the present case. So let me have the conclude of this presentation that in this work we propose a dominant-based minimal revision, which is a kind of semantics-based minimal revision. And this solves 2 problems in attempt to develop semantics-based minimal revision. One is This is not required to calculate the set of all conclusions for each case and is unaffected by the fact domain extension. And in further, we would like to develop effective algorithm for finding such minimal revision and make applications for other type of legal representation and other type of revisions and application for the case where the revision impacts several rules. So we hope that this minimal revision may lead to impact analysis in legal formalisms and may contribute to improving coherence in law. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward for the question. Thank you very much.
Questions from the audience. Okay. The first one from Mrs. Judith Garcia. How can we define a counterintuitive consequence?
Right. Thank you very much for the questions. So in this setting, in this work, we consider the setting called the legal debugging, which we assume that a legal listening system derives consequence from the literal interpretation. And user works as an oracle query of an unknown set of intended interpretation. And we determine a counterintuitive consequence is a consequence in the symmetric difference between consequence of literal interpretation from the system and the consequence of the intended interpretation from the user. So that is the brief definition of counterintuitive consequence. And we call such thing legal debugging because we make iterations to ask the user whether the related consequence are counterintuitive consequence. And this is how we determine the things that are called the culprit, which is the root, which we determine as a root of the counterintuitive consequence, and that we put the exception in. So this is the definitions of counterintuitive consequence and the culprit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wachara. Now, are you able to answer a second question?
Yes, so I have the second question about
can you read it for us, or would you like me to read for you?
So the second question that I have is, does the model proposed in the paper consider only counterintuitive consequence that arise from the literal interpretation of the rules, and also those that arise from other methods of legal interpretation? So if the answer is negative, is it possible to build a model capable of considering other methods of legal interpretation? So thank you very much for the question. It's interesting. First, we assume that the system, although we assume that the system represents a literal interpretation of the rules, but that is the primary presumption. However, if the user represents the system as any, it can represent the system in any application, any kind of interpretation, so that such interpretation that reflects from the system, it shall be determined as one that we would like to say that this is original interpretation, and the difference between intended one from the user and the one that obtained from the system is counted in this kind of counterintuitive consequence also. So this is one way to formalize this kind of interpretation that we have, although it's not a literal interpretation, but it's one that has been represented in the as a rule base, and the one that we have intended in interpretation in the user's mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wachara. Now you have
very much.
a minute for final words.
So thank you very much for your questions and comments. And I hope that I have received many recommended papers also. So thank you for that. And I would that is very interesting, and I will further read that paper theory. So thoroughly. So thank you very much.